Hello, welcome to this episode of It's All Happening. My name is Isaac and I am your host. Today we're going to be speaking to my friend Phoebe about her experience as an Aussie moving to London. I love all the tidbits that she shares in this episode and I can't wait for you guys to hear it. So lo and behold, this is Phoebe. I'm talking about her experience moving to London.
Hi, Phoebe. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I guess it'd be great if you could introduce yourself, where you're from and where you live now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, Isaac. Pleasure to be here. So my name's Phoebe Johnston and I am a Brisbane girl. So I've always grown up in Brisbane, Australia, spent high school there, university there, and then moved around a little bit for work. And now I live in London. So made the move over about just over 18 months ago now, and it's sort of crazy but safe to say that I would call London home.
What made you decide to move to London in the first place?
If I'm honest, it was a very spontaneous decision. I didn't really think it through particularly much. I got really lucky that some jobs and cards aligned in the order for me, and I decided to take the opportunity without thinking too heavily on it. But I suppose the background to that was that I ended up doing an exchange in the UK. And while I was here, I was sort of like, I quite like this country, and just got around talking with people about potential jobs and got very lucky that a job role opened. And I decided to make a decision to move my entire life to an entire different country, different hemisphere in the space of, sort of a 24-hour decision and then 4 weeks to execute it. So very spontaneous, but by far the best decision I've ever made.
You went on exchange to England. How did you decide to go on exchange to England? There's plenty of places you could have went. I know personally you almost went to, was it Spain?
That's true, yeah.
How did that all play out?
So with COVID, I suppose, was a bit of a spanner in the works in most of our degrees, right? And so it basically got right to the end of my degree before I had an opportunity to go on exchange. So my second last semester. And because of that, funnily enough, my opportunities and the universities I could have done courses at were very limited. So the fact I managed to get through an exchange was a bit of a miracle in the first place. But yes, so definitely had hoped for Spain and Copenhagen and just everywhere else in the world. Was looking at Edinburgh, and then none of those came through, but I ended up actually studying at the University of Birmingham, and honestly absolutely loved it. Like, it was a great university, made some really amazing friends there, and I think your most important thing and the thing you focus most on whilst on exchange is the travel. I was really lucky to have a lot of travel opportunities while I was there, so can't say I spent an awful lot of time in Birmingham, if I'm honest, but most of it traveling and studying on the side.
And did you get to London much during that period? Like, did you do many trips down?
Strangely, no. I think I went maybe like 2 or 3 times the entire time I was living in Birmingham, which now is a bit surreal because it's, an hour 10 away on the train. It's so close, and yet we just never ended up coming into London. So when I did actually move here, it was sort of like experiencing the city properly for the first time, which was really cool. Just to be able to like find my feet and find the places and to see it from a non-tourist perspective. I think when you live here, it's a very different experience than when you're just like traveling through or you're just staying a night or something like that.
To anyone listening, I know a lot of people are considering moving, some people that have never visited London before. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you could give us like an overview of like, how would you describe London and what's it like living there?
I love it. I adore London. I think there's so much to do here. It's such a fun city. There's always something happening and you're genuinely never bored. The travel opportunities are incredible. The career opportunities are incredible as well. And just the ability to meet so many more different people and to live in a really diverse society as well has been an absolute highlight. It's not quite the city that never sleeps, but it does go quite a lot. It's always moving and there's always something to do. If you jump fully in, you'll find yourself not getting home before 11 p.m. because you've got all these things and people to see and pubs to visit, and it's fantastic.
I'd love to touch on that access to Europe part. It's one of the main reasons why they're moving to London, especially as an Aussie. Like, we don't have access to countries at our fingertips. Like, first of all, have you been to many countries since living in England?
Answer is a definite yes, absolutely. I think I did a lot more travel probably when I was on exchange because I had a lot more freedom to do so, in that, studying was a little bit lighter on than full-time work. But even whilst doing full-time work, there's often that you'll just go and do a long weekend in France. And so gosh, where have I been? I spent a lot of time. I just came back from a trip around Turkey, which was incredible. Some time around Greece and Italy. Yeah, all over. You do like sort of long weekend trips, or I might go to Mallorca for 3 days because it's a £30 flight, and you just go, well, why not?
Yeah, so you've been to like Morocco, you've even been to Canada,
Yep.
which like isn't exactly close, but you've been on a
No,
trip
that's
there
a good
because
point.
it's definitely closer than Australia is to Canada.
It's quite entertaining when I talk with my British colleagues because I'll just go, oh, well, I've just booked flights to Canada. It's only a 6-hour flight. And everyone goes, oh my goodness, that's so far away. What are you talking about? Whereas like in my head, I'm like, well, but the 6 hours on a plane, that's nothing for us when we come from a minimum 24-hour flight to get over here. So that was awesome. I had some friends in Canada who I went to go visit because the flights were vaguely affordable. And I got to have a bit of a snowy, winter time over there, which was amazing. So everywhere is so much more accessible. It's awesome.
You mentioned that you got really lucky with a job and an opportunity to move to London, basically because you got a job there. You mentioned you were talking to people and discussing different roles and, just in the exploring phase of maybe moving. Yeah, if you could run us through, like, what was the process like to getting a job in London? What were some of the steps that you maybe took? I know you even made sacrifices yourself to, like, make the move. Like, you started as an intern when maybe you could have started as a grad, in Australia, for example. Run us through that whole journey from reaching out to people all the way through to kind of the role you're in right now.
I think the job journey for an Australian moving to London can be really difficult. I am fully aware that I've been really lucky in the journey in that I found a job pretty easily. It all aligned and I was very fortunate, but I know that's not the case for many people. Most of my friends, it can take 4 to 6 months to find a job over here, especially I think because there's so many more people in the market. You are fighting really hard to land a job, and especially a good job with a pay increase. It's a bit of a typical process, as you alluded to with my internship, that you may take an initial pay cut over here. Entry roles, especially grad entry roles, I would say are paid probably at a lower rate than Australia. So those are all things to definitely consider when you make the move over. I think the initial talking, I firmly believe in, it's always great to have a chat with someone and to learn what people are doing and what different companies are doing. I wouldn't even necessarily say networking. Sometimes it's just having a conversation and learning something new about someone else. And so I think always having those conversations are really important and was a pretty fundamental base for me to establish this connection and then get a job offer with this company. So when I was over here, I met a few connections. I personally work in the energy industry in consulting. And so I had a few companies that I wanted to talk to and line up with while I was over here, just even to find out what people were doing over here compared to Australia and how the market was different, and just to have those initial conversations. Just having a chat and even reaching out to people on LinkedIn, you can do the exact same thing. You don't have to be on the ground. It was just convenient that I was on exchange and in the country at the same time. But those initial conversations led me to a job, which was actually an internship. Not a fully paid job, and it was far below minimum wage that you would expect in Australia. Definitely not a livable salary in London. So first 3 months were pretty rough, because I did have a background back home where I had worked full-time for a few years, but the program that I had done, which was studying and working full-time, isn't a structure that exists over in the UK. So trying to convince senior business people that I had 3 years of full-time work experience whilst still not having a degree but studying at the same time was a really hard sell, because that's just something that doesn't happen over here and no one could quite comprehend it. So I had to go back and start as an intern, and I sort of made a spontaneous decision that, you know what, it's a job in London, let's do it. I definitely could have gone back to Australia and started at a grad role and move over at a later date, but I loved living over here, and to see that path to be like, well, hopefully it won't be a long internship and it'll be sort of a grad role and then hopefully a quick promotion after that. I decided to just wing it and throw all my coins on that one, which was definitely the best opportunity and the best decision I've made by far. So, but the first 3 months were definitely a bit harder in that I really had to sort of prove that I had experience and I wasn't just the graduate who, had just been studying, I suppose, which there's obviously nothing wrong with that. But I think the expectations were slightly different as well. I think also them not having worked with many Australians was another sort of challenge, in that sometimes I think people just go, oh, Australia's really laid back and it's a really small market, but we still have big clients and we do really big projects and we do have really big experience. And trying to sort of convey that we have a fantastic work ethic was something that took a little bit of groundwork as well to sort of get that message across and for them to see that. And then, you know, the promotion sort of come through and they go, oh, yes, you're very confident. You know what you're doing.
I've heard this multiple times that I think as an Australian, you think going to London because the market's much deeper and so more clients, more work, that the work pace would be really quick and really intense. But I've heard that it is almost the opposite because there's like almost a cultural shift because of how hard it is to establish yourself financially in England. People are not as career oriented. And so therefore, like the general pace that they work at might even be different. Is there any truth to that?
It's something that I have probably definitely seen.
I can't speak. I can't say anything about that.
Yeah, I can't get all the secrets out. No, it's something I've discussed with a lot of Australian friends as well, and that I think sometimes the work intensity in Australia is a lot more than over here, which was a really big surprise. As you said, I totally thought it would be far more intense over here, longer hours, and it's very dependent on the company you're at. Absolutely. I think if you're with a really big global company, it will be fast-paced and a lot of work and expected to be long hours. Law is also another really tough one over here. They do incredibly long hours. But a lot of my friends in other industries have found it to be a lot more laid back, we'll say, than before back in Australia.
Okay, so we've covered off getting a job. Once you've got a job, or maybe you don't have a job and you've already decided to make the move. I've heard the accommodation market is quite hard. It's hard to find a place.
Yes.
I guess, what was your strategy like? Like, you know, how did you find the experience? And then maybe heard any tips or tricks, or you've used any yourself that you might be able to pass on to any Aussies that are listening that are thinking about moving to London or making the move?
I think there's a lot of online resources which really help. Honestly, shout them out. Aussies in London, great like starting place. It's a Facebook page which has far too many thousands of Australians who've now moved to London in there. It's a really nice resource, and they often do, you know, put out sub pages for housing opportunities. There's lots of online websites. I ended up finding my house through a Facebook group chat. There were lots of like girls in London or girls looking for accommodation or just like people looking for accommodation in certain areas in London. So if you know where you want to live, I think that's a number one, you know, helpful tip. A lot of Aussies and a lot of friends I know started in sublets just to come over and try a few different areas, see where they actually enjoy living. You'll find every area in London is really different. Southwest is completely different to East London. Like you couldn't get, well, geographically further apart, but culturally very, very different as well. So it's sort of nice to have a bit of trial and error as to where you might want to live in London and, you know, what suburbs you connect with best. Really depends where your friends might live as well, or where your job is. You ideally want a sort of semi-direct, you know, journey to work. Fastest journey is probably about half an hour to get to work. I think I'm about 45 minutes, and most people could easily be up to an hour. So if you're not on a direct line, that is a lot of extra time out of your day. So I think definitely Facebook pages. There's a whole bunch of websites as well, which none of them are springing to mind right now, but Aussies in London is always a good spot to start finding accommodation. And talk to any friends who are over here. Where do they like living? Where do they recommend? What suburbs do they enjoy spending most of their time in? Where are the best cafes, pubs? I mean, you'll find them everywhere, but it's what connects with you best.
You've covered off, you've got them a job, they now have accommodation. I find even when I moved to Sydney, one of the hardest things for me to really grapple was making new friends. How did you go? Like, did you start from scratch? At least from a distance, it looks like you have like built a really strong friendship group, if that's right. How have you gone about that? Because it really seems like it's been built from scratch.
I think time is the biggest one in that. So as you said, I came to London and I didn't know anyone. So that was a bit of an overwhelming experience. I sort of got off the plane and went and met my new roommate, and that was about it. I didn't really have anyone else apart from some maybe like distant connections over here. So I did what is now a classic, you know, Gen Z thing, and joined a run club. And strangely, I've actually met all of my closest friends through there. Not all of them still, you know, run, or I've met friends of friends through that. But I really had to put in effort to go out of my way and make friends. I think I sort of had a moment of realization where London's the type of place that people aren't going to come to you. You need to go out and definitely make the effort and try and make friends. But I think like my biggest recommendation would be find something you enjoy and you'll always find people here who enjoy the same things and want to share that passion. There's so many different community groups or hobby groups or sporting groups, so many sporting clubs as well, like lots of different social teams. If you like pottery, there's pottery classes everywhere. If you're into music, there's so many live shows or comedy shows. I think you really just want to try to find something that makes you happy and that you enjoy doing and you want to put your time into. And then you're going to find similar people along the way. But it took time. It absolutely took time. I think the first 6 months were really rough. There were still moments where I went, I have no one to message right now. And that's a really surreal and sort of scary feeling. You know, everyone who you're close with back home is asleep because it's 1 a.m. and you're just sort of questioning your whole life and you've got no one around. So like those moments were hard. And I think that's a realistic part of moving your entire life overseas, is that you are going to have those really tough moments. But it gets better with time. I think, you know, after normally I'd say about 3 months for lots of places, but I think London it's such a big city. You probably need about 6 months to really find your feet and be like, I know my friends and I'm enjoying work, or, you know, I've got good people around me and I can go on a holiday whenever I want, and I've got that financial security, and I like my local pubs, and I know my library or my grocery stores or my favorite bakeries. It's once you have that sort of familiarity, things start falling into place and the right people sort of somehow just turn up into your life as well. Be open to meeting people, be open to having a conversation. It's not often people come up to you for a conversation in London. People can be a bit unfriendly like that. So when they do, as long as they don't seem too off the mark, you know, maybe have a friendly chat. Something Australians are very good at doing. So
I love that. There's really two main things I hear when people give reasons why not to move to London, and not necessarily from Londoners. I feel like this is Australians projecting this. First of all, how safe have you found it? Is there moments you felt unsafe, or do you find that, you know, the safety compared to Australia actually isn't that stark as long as you've got your wits about you?
I've been pretty fortunate in that, like, I think with the area I live in feels quite safe, but I'm a lot more aware here than in Australia by far. Like, there's no question about that. Phone stealing is ridiculous here. Like, I would never walk down the street on my phone, just straight up. You just don't really do that, especially if you're anywhere near central London. Like, I've witnessed it. I've watched people's phones gotten stolen off them. You know, people come past on electric bikes and just grab it out of your hand. That is a very common thing here. You wouldn't put it in your back pocket. And so that was I think that was probably my number one, you know, cultural shock when I first came to London and watched a poor lady's phone getting, you know, yanked out of her hand by someone on an electric bike. I was like, oh my goodness. And it's a bit scary because it makes you realize how reliant you are on your phone. All my banking's on there, all my contacts are on there, like everything on my life is on there. It's like, you know, your visas are probably on there. So that was a bit of a surreal one, and that's one that I would highly recommend. Even if you're just traveling through London, please be hyper aware. There's nothing worse than having your phone stolen. A, it's an expensive thing to replace, and B, it's an absolute nightmare to try to get all your data back. So definitely be very aware on that. In terms of other general safety, I know there's always incidents. It is a really big city. I personally haven't really witnessed much, or I've been very fortunate to not have encountered anything. You're aware of where you go. You wouldn't walk down dark streets at night. You're pretty aware of, like, you know, where people are and where you are across the street. There's certain areas you just wouldn't go in general. Maybe I would be far more safety aware here than I have been back in Australia, but not to an extent that it would make me move. Like, on a day-to-day basis, I feel incredibly safe.
The second thing, which I think is honestly the overwhelming answer I get as a objection to moving to London.
I think I know what it is.
How are the winters? How are the winters? Is the weather an actual deal breaker? How was your first winter?
First winter was okay in that I think I unlocked the key to winter in London, which is not being in London in winter. That is by far the key. If you can get out and go anywhere else, if you're going somewhere that's colder but snowy, much nicer, fine. If you go to Morocco or Portugal, you can somehow get away with about 20-degree days instead of -2. So I definitely think the key to getting through winter is being busy on your weekends. Sitting at home is not it. You'll definitely fall into a bit of a pile of despair, that's for sure. As much travel as you can, or just seeing people booking in trips. And taking vitamin D supplements. I could not recommend it more highly for Australians. It sounds crazy, but it genuinely makes such a big difference on your mood, because you know, it's one thing it being cold, that's fine, you can layer up. It's the fact that you just don't see the sun for months. Is it a deal breaker? No, because I love London. And I do think like when you're busy and you're doing things and you're at work most of the time anyway, you're okay. Like you sort of get through it. Everyone's grumpy, but you're bit united in your grumpiness together. But definitely like taking vitamin D supplements will really help your mood, and you won't realize how much of a difference it makes until you start them. And then you go, oh, wow, I feel great again. What was wrong? But I think January, February is the hardest months. The leads up to Christmas is totally fine because you've got your Christmas lights and it's really nice. You know, it's just a beautiful place to be in the lead up to Christmas. Great spirits. But January, February, I'd recommend trying to sort of book some travel in there, escape London, get out of it. But you know what? You get through it. It's fine. Like, and there's nothing nicer than sitting in a warm pub with a Sunday roast and, you know, a nice like cup of mulled wine. So there's definitely ways you get through it together.
What was kind of the hardest part of moving to the other side of the world?
Oh, it's a big one. I think it was not knowing anyone and not knowing where I should go and, you know, where my safe places or familiar places are or my grounding places for me. It's sort of starting your life from scratch, which is a really terrifying thing. But I think you almost, and something I did after, you know, having lots of conversations with my parents, is repivoting your mindset. Be like, this is a really exciting opportunity and it's terrifying to do it all on your own, but it's also exciting that you're building something yourself from scratch. And that's awesome. Like everything that you do over here is, you know, your choice and your decision, and you come and you decorate your flat and everything is, you know, yours, not something that maybe like roommates have put in there or your parents have put in there. Having the opportunity to create the life that you actually want and deciding, well, if I want something, then I'm going to be the only person to go out and make that happen for me. I just have to try to do it as much as I can. That was really cool. Terrifying, absolutely terrifying, but exciting. So I think the first, 6 months were really sort of rough in that regard, and that just building up those connections and finding that security network and that community around you. That was definitely scary. When I first came over, I didn't love the job that I do now. I really enjoy it. But I remember the first few months being like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, I've come here, I hate the job. I've moved my entire life overseas. Like, what now? Yeah. And it's sort of just trying to overcome that and be like, let's give it some time. Let's give it 6 months. Let's see how it goes. And I think, and experience through a lot of my friends, you either love it or you don't. And there is absolutely nothing wrong if you don't love it and you want to go home. I think moving overseas is a really big thing, and you decide what's best for you. And it might be, home is your happy place. There's nothing wrong with that. Or it might be you absolutely love it. You just got to stick with your gut and, you'll overcome those terrifying moments.
Has there been moments where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I've done this?
Oh, every day. Honestly, I have them all the time. I honestly, even every time I see Tower Bridge, I still have a moment where I go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I live here. Horrifically, to anyone who actually does live in London, I still occasionally have that moment on the tube. When you first move here, you'll love the tube, and then you'll just get so sick of it. But also, like, I'll still have a moment of clarity where I go, oh my God, this is amazing. I can't believe, like, I take the tube to work. Like, this is crazy. Okay, maybe not to work, because that's a really not enjoyable experience for anyone, but like when the tube's not busy, you can have those moments of clarity. Even I was at a music festival with friends the other day, and all my closest friends who I've made over here, and so I didn't know them back home, but I just had a moment where I was like, oh my goodness, like I can't believe you guys are in my life when you weren't in my life 3 years ago. And it's really surreal that this is where I am and this is my life now. And yeah, so short answer, all the time. Sometimes you'll just be walking through a really very quintessential English looking part of London, and you just have to stop and be like, I live here, like this is my home. And I think that's maybe more the surreal part, is that I call it home, like this is home now. Surreal moments all the time. Getting on a plane to Europe, surreal moment. Just you'd be walking around Portugal and be like, I was in London 2 hours ago. What?
What is your elevator pitch for moving to London as an Aussie?
You have to, number one, start with the travel. You can be in Europe in under 2 hours. Like, that is crazy. You get the train over to Paris. Why not? Rent a car, go drive to France, keep driving through Europe. Phenomenal. Oh, one of my bigger pitches would be London summer. Like Europe summer, London summer is unreal. And I'm very much a summer baby back in Australia as well. And I must, as much as I do miss the beach, a London summer is unreal. There is just nothing better than like sitting in the park with your mates, having a few bottles of wine, a huge picnic of snacks, playing a bit of football or like cards, or, going for like sort of swims on the, ponds in Hampstead Heath. Not quite the same as as swimming at the beach in Australia, but we'll take what we get. Pubs. Like, pub culture here is unreal. I think actually the best part is as soon as you get a good weather day in London, the whole city's attitude changes. Like, everyone comes alive and everyone's outside and everyone's happy and friendly and wants to chat, and just the spirit of the city changes. And I suppose it's something I might have taken, for granted, in that we don't really have back home because we're very fortunate to have good weather most of the time. So when you've just had weeks of rain and all of a sudden it turns around, it is genuinely the best feeling in the entire world. Yeah, I love it. London summer is unreal. The travel is unreal. Pub culture is pretty fantastic if that's something you're into. So many different activities and clubs. If running's your thing, there's a million run clubs for you to join. Almost really too many. There's so many shows and cultural experiences and musicals, and I love it. There's so much to do here.
If you had any advice to someone who is moving to London, I guess what would be your top 3 tips?
Oh, I think overall my highest recommendation, which is not part of the top 3, is to do it. Bet on yourself. You're not going to regret it. Give it a go. The worst come to worst is that you need to go home because you don't love it. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think top 3 tips is put some money aside. Number 1, it's an expensive place to live, especially if you're living on the Aussie dollar for the first few months whilst trying to lock in a flat and a job. Sometimes on flats, you'll have to put down a deposit and maybe 2 months of rent down. So that can be quite expensive as well if you haven't got a job locked in. And also remember, you're losing half of your dollar every time you convert over. The exchange rate is not good. Second recommendation would definitely be talk to people, work out what you want to do for work. But also, if you actually don't know what you want to do, there's nothing bad about starting with a bar job or just working, casually in a totally different industry. A job is a job. If it pays you in pounds, that's fantastic. That's what you need to survive. It is an expensive place to live. Honestly, it's probably actually about the same as Sydney. I think Sydney's really expensive, but when you lose half your dollar over here, that makes it a lot worse. And then probably thirdly, say yes for the plot. That has been my number 1 motto since moving here, and I genuinely think it's brought the best people into my life. It's brought me some opportunities that I never would have expected, and I probably wouldn't have given a go back home. But why not? You're only here once. You might only be here for a year or 2 years, so say yes to everything. You have no idea who's going to walk into your life through you saying yes to a random house party, or randomly going to the cricket or the football or something like that. Say yes to everything. It's such an amazing city, and so much happens here. Give every opportunity a go that comes your way.
Well, let's finish on that note, because I feel like that is everything that this podcast is about. It's really just about going after it and taking every opportunity and saying yes to opportunities and going after what you really want. That is just such a good way to end the podcast. So thank you so much, Phoebe.
Thank you, Isaac.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, and I hope if you're listening, you've got all the tips you need to make that move to London, and you heard it here first. Just do it.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Isaac. It's been great chatting.